Hey, welcome back to this. In this video, I'm going to talk about the Brothers Grimm story of the Glass Coffin. This might have resonance for you for Snow White, who was put in a glass coffin. I want you to keep track of who is who in this story and what is going on. We're going to have shapeshifter changes, which is kind of cool. Wouldn't it be cool if you could change yourself into an animal? And that happens in this story. Let no one ever say that a poor tailor cannot do great things and with high honors. So we have introduced right in the first sentence the idea of a poor tailor. You know, a dude who sews for a living. And mostly tailors, they don't make a lot of money, right? But let no one say this. So in a way, in this first sentence, we have the idea that even though you're from the lower class, you can do really, really great things. All that is needed is that he should go to the right smithy, and what is of most consequence, that he should have good luck. A civil, adroit tailor's apprentice once went out traveling, so it's only an apprentice tailor, right? And came into a great forest, and as he did not know the way, he lost himself. Night fell, and nothing was left for him to do but to seek a bed in this painful solitude. I want you to remember this phrase. Painful solitude. It's one thing to take time for yourself and to get away from people, but when you're so alone that it feels painful, there's a problem. He might certainly have found a good bed on the soft moss, but the fear of wild beasts let him have no rest there. At last he was forced to make up his mind to spend the night in a tree. He sat at a high oak, climbed up to the top of it, and thanked God that he had his goose with him, for otherwise the wind which blew over the top of the tree would have carried him away. So somehow this poor tailor is anchored during winds by a goose. After he'd spent some hours in the darkness, not without fear and trembling, he saw at a very short distance the glimmer of a light, and as he thought that a human habitation might be there, where he would be better off than on the branches of a tree, he got carefully down and went towards the light. Now it's interesting that he hid himself in a tree, because Homo sapiens, more than 200,000 years ago, lived in trees. And what's the advantage of living in trees? If you know about chickens or you know about turkeys, you get yourself up off the ground away from predators. But if you take a brand newborn baby, and you hold it in your hands and go like this, that baby's legs and arms will spread out. I can't show you my legs because of the camera angle. And I believe and this is hardwired, and I believe that an action that baby does is to not fall through the branches. Because why? Because Homo sapiens saved themselves by living in trees from the beginning. So he went towards the light. It guided him to a small hut that was woven together of reeds and rushes. He knocked boldly. The door opened, and by the light which came forth he saw a little hoary old man who wore a coat made of bits of colored stuff sewn together. So here we have a traveler who needs shelter. "Who are you and what do you want?" asked the man in a grumbling voice. Sorry, I should say that this way. "Who are you and what do you want?" asked the man in a grumbling voice. "I am a poor tailor." He's being honest, right? He answered, "whom night has surprised here in the wilderness, and I earnestly beg you to take me into your hut until the morning." "Go away," replied the old man in a surly voice. "I will have nothing to do with rascals. Seek shelter somewhere else." After these words, he was about to slip into his hut again, but the tailor held him so tightly by the corner of his coat and pleaded so piteously that the old man, who was not so ill-natured as he wished to appear, was at last softened and took him into the hut with him, where he gave him something to eat and then pointed out to him a very good bed in a corner. The weary tailor needed no rocking, but slept sweetly till morning, but even then would not have thought of getting up if he had not been aroused by a great noise. A violent sound of screaming and roaring forced its way through the thin walls of the hut. The tailor, full of unwonted courage, jumped up, put his clothes on in haste, and hurried out. Then close by the hut he saw a great black bull. Let's see if I have a marker that is in black. He sees a bull, and it's not just a regular bull. It's a great black bull. And a beautiful stag. Now, if you're a hunter, you might know what a stag is. If you're not a hunter, you probably don't. This is a big deer, a male deer. So we have a bull and a deer who are fighting. Now, the bull in Western culture has always been associated with masculinity, virility, and power. So, on the surface, who would one think would win? A bull versus a male deer? Probably you'd choose the bull. And the stag was preparing just for a violent struggle. They rushed, the bull and the deer, rushed at each other with such extreme rage that the ground shook with their trampling, the air resounded with their cries. For a long time it was uncertain which of the two would gain the victory. At length, the stag thrust his horns into his adversary's body, whereupon the bull fell to the earth with a terrific roar and was thoroughly dispatched by a few strokes from the stag. So the stag becomes victorious. The tailor, who had watched the fight with astonishment, was still standing there motionless when the stag in full career bounded up to him, and before he could escape, caught him up on his great horns. So now he's being kidnapped by the stag. He had not much time to collect his thoughts, for it went in a swift race over stock and stone, mountain and valley, wood and meadow. He held with both hands to the tops of the horns and resigned himself to his fate. He's being swept up in that moment, right? It seemed to him, however, just as if he were flying away. At length, the stag stopped in front of the wall of a rock and gently laid the tailor down. The tailor, more dead than alive, required a longer time than that to come to himself, and when he had in some degree recovered, the stag, which had remained standing by him, pushed its horns with such force against a door which was in the rock that it sprang open. Flames of fire shot forth, after which followed a great smoke which hid the stag from the poor tailor's sight. The tailor did not know what to do or whither to turn in order to get out of this desert and back to human beings again. And by desert, a deserted place, in a solitary place. So the tailor is in the middle of nowhere and has nowhere to go. He's just been carried there by a deer. Or I guess in modern parlance, a buck. While he was standing thus undecided, a voice sounded out of the rock, which cried to him, "Enter without fear. No evil shall befall thee." He certainly hesitated, but, driven by a mysterious force, he obeyed the voice, went through the iron door into a large, spacious hall, whose ceiling, walls, and floor were made of shining, polished, square stones, on each of which were cut letters which were unknown to him. Have you ever tried to learn another language that's not in the Phoenician alphabet? It's very difficult. So in this case, think of hieroglyphs, or think of Chinese writing. He looked at everything full of admiration, was on the point of going out again, when once more he heard the voice which said to him, "Step on the stone which lies in the middle of the hall, and great fortune awaits thee." His courage had already grown so great that he obeyed the order. The stone began to give way under his feet, and he sank slowly down into the depths. When it was once more firm, and the tailor looked around, he found himself in a hall which in size resembled the former. So we have a stone elevator, basically. Here, however, there was more to look at and to admire. Hollow places were cut in the walls, in which stood vases of transparent glass, which were filled with colored spirit, or with a bluish vapor. Colored spirit would be alcohol. Okay. On the floor of the hall, two great glass chests stood opposite to each other, which at once excited his curiosity. When he went to one of them, he saw inside it a handsome structure, like a castle surrounded by farm buildings, stables, barns, and a quantity of other good things. Everything was small, but exceedingly carefully and delicately made, and seemed to be cut out by a dexterous hand with the greatest exactitude. So he's looking into, through a glass case, into a miniature city with a castle. He might not have turned away his eyes from the consideration of this rarity for some time if the voice, okay, so we have the voice, right? And we're not talking about the TV program, The Voice, right? If the voice had not once made itself again heard, it ordered him to turn around and look at the glass chest which was standing opposite. How his admiration increased when he saw therein a maiden of the greatest beauty. So here we have a maiden, a young woman, enclosed in glass. Is that not like a Sleeping Beauty? She lay except for Sleeping Beauty was only 7 years old, I guess. She lay as if asleep and was wrapped in her long fair hair as if in a precious mantle. Her eyes were closely shut, but the brightness of her complexion and a ribbon which her breathing moved to and fro left no doubt that she was alive. So instead of it being a coffin, it's a glass case that a young woman is trapped in. The tailor was looking at the beauty with beating heart when she suddenly opened her eyes and started up at the sight of him in joyful terror. "Just heaven," meaning heaven gives justice, cried she. "My deliverance is at hand. Quick, help me out of my prison. If you push back the bolt of this glass coffin, then I shall be free." How many of us live in glass coffins, waiting for somebody to help us out of those coffins? And if you're in a glass coffin and you're not dead, you certainly are trapped. The tailor obeyed without delay, and she immediately raised up the glass lid and came out and hastened into the corner of the hall, where she covered herself with a large cloak. Then she seated herself on a stone, ordered the young man to come her, and after she had imprinted a friendly kiss on his lips, she said, "My long-desired deliverer, kind heaven has guided you to me and put an end to my sorrows. On the same day when they end, shall your happiness begin." So when my sorrows are over, you're going to be very, very happy. "You are the husband chosen for me by heaven, and you shall pass your life in unbroken joy, loved by me, and rich to overflowing in every earthly possession. Seat yourself and listen to the story of my life." That's kind of a lot, right? You're out there, you're traveling, you go stay at a cheap motel. They barely let you in because you don't have the right credit card or you don't have enough money on you. You sleep there, you come out, you get transported to a mountain that's made of stone, and then all of a sudden a door opens up. Oh, you get transported by a stag, a buck, and a door opens up, and you go in and you're like, whoa! And a stone elevator takes you down, and you find two glass coffins, one that has a city in it and another that has a beautiful woman in it. And what are you supposed to think? So here is her story. "I am the daughter of a rich count." A count is someone in the aristocracy. "My parents died when I was still in my tender youth and recommended me in their last will to my elder brother. So they gave guardianship of her to her older brother, by whom I was brought up. We loved each other so tenderly, and so we're so alike in our way of thinking and our inclinations that we both embraced the resolution to never marry, but stay together until the end of our lives. In our house, there was no lack of company. Neighbors, friends visited us often. We showed the greatest hospitality to everyone. So it came to pass one evening that a stranger came riding up to our castle, and under pretext of not being able to get on to the next place, begged for shelter for the night. And we granted his request with ready courtesy, and he entertained us in the most agreeable manner during supper by conversation intermingled with stories. My brother liked the stranger so much that he begged him to spend a couple of days with us, to which, after some hesitation, he consented. We did not rise from the table until late in the night. The stranger was shown to a room, and I hastened, as I was tired, to lay my limbs in my soft bed. So a stranger comes out of nowhere, and we were kind to the stranger, and we invited him, and we took really good care of him. Hardly had I slept for a short time when the sound of faint and delightful music awoke me. As I could not conceive from whence it came, I wanted to summon my waiting maid, who slept in the next room, but to my astonishment I found that speech was taken away from me by an unknown force. I want you to think about the idea of not being able to talk. That if you woke up one morning and couldn't speak, what would happen to you? How would you feel? Would you feel trapped? I think so. Or how about if in our society you made people voiceless? For example, in Florida a few years ago, most Floridians voted to restore felons' rights for voting. Because in Florida, it's been a tradition that if you were convicted of a $500 crime, you could never vote again. You could never exercise your voice. You were made voiceless. Even after we passed that amendment, I voted for it. The legislature put blocks in the road to make it so that people could not vote. And so I believe, I don't want to exaggerate, but 3+ million convicted felons. And because you're a felon doesn't mean that you committed a violent crime, cannot vote. They are voiceless. I felt as if a mountain were weighing down on my breast and was unable to make the very slightest sound. In the meantime, by the light of my night lamp, I saw the stranger, the one that they've helped out, enter my room through 2 doors which were fast bolted. So he was able to go through locked doors. He came to me and said that by magic arts which were at his command, he had caused the lovely music to sound in order to awaken me, and that he now forced his way through all fastenings of the doors with the intention of offering me his hand and heart. So you get woken up by beautiful music. A complete stranger walks through your bedroom door that is locked and then says, "Here, I want to marry you." Are you serious? I mean, how would you react? My repugnance to his magic arts was, however, so great that I vouchsafed him no answer. I did not reply. He remained for a time standing without moving, apparently with the idea for a favorable decision. But as I continued to keep silent, he angrily declared he would revenge himself and find means to punish my pride, and left the room. So you meet a dude who's like, I love you, and you're thinking, what? And then when you don't give an answer, dude says, "You're just too proud, I'm going to take you down." I passed the night in the greatest disquietude, and I only fell asleep towards morning. When I woke, I hurried to my brother, but did not find him in his room, and the tenants told me that he had ridden forth with a stranger to the chase by daybreak. So she runs to her brother, who she trusts, and is told that, nope, he's not here. He went out hunting with the stranger that came last night. I at once suspected nothing good. I dressed myself quickly, ordered my palfrey to be saddled, and accompanied only by one servant, I rode full gallop to the forest. The servant fell with his horse and could not follow me, for the horse had broken its foot. So in the forest, she's completely alone. I pursued my way without halting, and in a few minutes I saw the stranger coming towards me with a beautiful stag, which he led by a cord. I asked him where he had left my brother and how he had come by the stag, out of whose great eyes I saw tears flowing. Instead of answering me, he began to laugh loudly. I fell into a great rage at this, pulled out a pistol, and discharged it at the monster. But the ball rebounded from his breast and went into my horse's head. I fell to the ground, and the stranger muttered some words which deprived me of consciousness. Does that not sound like date rape to you? No, date rapists typically don't mutter some words. They just pour drugs into your drink. When I came to my senses again, I found myself in this underground cave in a glass coffin. The magician appeared once again and said he had changed my brother into a stag. My castle, with all that belonged to it, diminished in size by his arts, he'd shut up in the other glass chest. And my people, who were all turned into smoke, he had confined in glass bottles. So instead of spirits, meaning alcohol, when the poor tailor walks into the room and sees all these different colored bottles, it's the essence of people. He told me that if I would now comply with his wish, which is to marry him, it was an easy thing for him to put everything back in its former state, as he had nothing to do but open the vessels, and everything would return once more to its natural form. I answered him as little as I had done the first time, so she refuses to speak. He vanished, and he left me in my prison, in which a deep sleep came on me. Among the visions which passed before my eyes, that was the most comforting, in which a young man came and set me free. And when I opened my eyes today, I saw you and beheld my dream fulfilled. Help me to accomplish the other things which happen in those visions. The first is that we lift the glass chest in which my castle is enclosed onto that broad stone. As soon as the stone was laden, it began to rise up on high with the maiden and the young man, and mounted through the opening of the ceiling into the upper hall, from whence they then could easily reach the open air. And here the maiden opened the lid, and it was marvelous to behold how the castle, the houses, the farm buildings which were enclosed, stretched themselves out and grew to their natural size with the greatest rapidity. After this, the maiden and the tailor returned to the cave beneath the earth, and had the vessels which were filled with smoke carried up by the stone. The maiden had scarcely opened the bottles when the blue smoke rushed out and changed into living men, in whom she recognized her servants and her people. Her joy was still more increased when her brother, who had killed the magician in the form of a bull, came out of the forest towards them in his human form. And on the self-same day, the maiden, in accordance with her promise, gave her hand at the altar to the lucky tailor. I'd like you to listen to this story again and think about what it means. One meaning that's on the surface could mean that even if you are poor, if you do the right things, life will treat you well. Now, it's very hard for me to believe that the tailor was in love with the woman in the glass coffin. On the other hand, poverty versus riches, maybe he's a trophy toy or a trophy husband. It's also, though, that life sometimes is so hard, it seems like there's some sort of evil magician who is harming us. In Christianity, they call that the devil. I'd like to hear what you think. Thank you.